They thought they were smart. My own wife and her family voted me out of the tech empire I built from nothing, smiling as they destroyed 25 years of blood and sweat. But while they celebrated their victory, I was already 3 moves ahead with a plan that would cost them everything. My name is James Thornfield. I'm 58 years old, and I used to own the fastest growing tech company in Silicon Valley. Used to being the key phrase there. Technova Industries started in my garage in Palo Alto back in '98. Just me and a soldering iron, building custom circuit board for startups that couldn't afford the big guys. 25 years later, we had 4 manufacturing plants, offices in 12 states, and 800 employees building everything from smartphone components to military-grade communication systems. The betrayal came on a Tuesday morning, right between my second and third cup of that awful conference room coffee. No shouting, no drama, just cold, calculated business delivered in Rebecca's monotone voice as she read from prepared notes. My wife of 22 years, sitting there in her navy blazer like she was conducting a board meeting instead of executing her husband's life work. The board has voted, Rebecca announced without looking up from her papers. Effective immediately, James Thornfield will step down as CEO of Technova Industries. The company requires younger, more digitally native leadership to compete in today's market. I sat there, watching Clayton Hayes, my brother-in-law, lean back in his chair with that smug expression he perfected over the years. The same guy who couldn't even set up his own Wi-Fi router was telling me I wasn't tech-savvy enough. Landon Cruz, Rebecca's cousin, actually had the nerve to wink at me when they called it a unanimous decision. 25 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights, and they dismissed it with a PowerPoint presentation. But here's the thing about building something from nothing. You learn to think ahead. Way ahead. While they were busy patting themselves on the back, I smiled. A real genuine smile that made them shift uncomfortably in their seats because they knew it meant something they didn't understand yet. Thank you all for your honesty, I said, standing up and straightening my tie. I appreciate the clarity. Security escorted me to the elevator like I was some kind of threat. 25 years. And suddenly, I needed an escort to leave my own building. The security guard, Rodriguez, couldn't even make eye contact. Poor kid was just following orders, but I smiled at him too. The kind of smile that says everything's going to be just fine. By the time I reached the parking lot, my access badge was already deactivated. My reserved parking spot, the one with my name on it, now had a visitor's tag on my windshield. Funny how quickly you become a stranger in your own house. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I'd been coasting these past few years, letting them handle the business side while I played with my gadgets in the lab. Truth is, I've been building something they never saw coming. Call it paranoia, call it preparation. Either way, they just activated the wrong protocol. The drive home was silent. No radio, no phone calls, just the hum of my Tesla Model S cutting through Palo Alto traffic. I passed the Technova billboards on Highway 101, our logo gleaming in the California sun like some kind of corporate monument. Funny how something you built can suddenly feel like someone else's achievement. When I pulled into the driveway of our Athens mansion, the garage door opener still worked. Small mercies. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the space where it all began. The corner where I'd built my first prototype. The workbench where I'd bled actual blood designing the circuit board that would eventually power half the smartphones in America. The garage smelled like WD-40 and nostalgia. I walked over to the old filing cabinet, not the obvious one with company documents, but the smaller one hidden behind my tool rack. Inside was a USB drive I'd hoped never to use. The label read, "Failsafe Protocol," in my own handwriting from 3 years ago. I booted up my old laptop, the one I'd kept offline for exactly this purpose. No corporate network, no cloud sync, just a standalone machine that couldn't be traced or monitored. The drive contained 12 folders, each named with a date and a code word. I clicked on the one labeled Phoenix Rising. The first file was a video message. There I was, 2 years younger, sitting in this same garage late at night. My recorded self looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, James, it means they finally grew a pair and try to push you out. Good. That means we're ready to burn it all down." I paused the video and reached for the bourbon bottle on my workbench. Still had dust on it from when our first major client gave it to me after we hit 10 million in revenue. "Save this for when you really need it," he'd said. Tonight felt like the night. The second file contained legal documents I'd been quietly preparing for months. Shell companies, trust structures, and voting rights transfers that my family never bothered to read. While Clayton was busy playing golf and Landon was posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn, I've been moving chess pieces they didn't even know existed. Rebecca thought she'd married a simple engineer who got lucky. What she didn't realize was that engineers don't just build products. We build systems, redundancies, backup plans, and sometimes we build traps. I opened the third file and started typing an encrypted message to someone who'd been waiting for my call for 7 years. Vincent Blackwood, CEO of Apex Dynamics, had tried to acquire Teknova back in 2016. I'd told him to take a hike. Tonight, I was going to make him an offer he'd never forget. The message was simple. Vincent, remember our conversation about strategic partnerships? I'm ready to discuss terms. Tonight, I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Phase 1 of the Phoenix Protocol was now active. My family thought they'd killed me, but they'd just given me permission to resurrect myself as something much more dangerous. Vincent Blackwood called me at 11:47 p.m. I was still in the garage, surrounded by documents and empty bourbon glasses, when my secure phone buzzed. James Thornfield. Vincent's voice carried that familiar edge of barely controlled ambition. After 7 years of radio silence, you reach out tonight. I'm intrigued. Vincent, I'm ready to discuss that acquisition you've been dreaming about, I said, cutting straight to the point. But there's something you need to know first. I don't just want to sell, I want to destroy. There was a pause. Vincent understood power plays better than anyone in Silicon Valley. What happened? Family coup. They voted me out this morning, thinking they were inheriting an empire. Problem is, they never bothered to understand what they were stealing. And what weren't they understanding, James? I pulled up the corporate structure charts on my laptop. They think they own Teknova. Truth is, I've been moving assets for 3 years. Shell companies, trust arrangements, offshore holdings. The real question is, are you still interested in acquiring the crown jewel of Silicon Valley tech? Name your price. $79 million. Cash. Full transfer within 24 hours. Vincent laughed. Not the friendly kind, but the sound a shark makes when it smells blood. You're serious. You want to burn them out completely. Every last share, Vincent. And I want them to find out from you personally. Deal. I'll have my legal team draw up the papers within the hour. After ending the call, I walked to another corner of the garage and pulled back a tarp covering an old motorcycle. Beneath it was a floor safe I'd installed 5 years ago. Inside were documents that would make Vincent's acquisition look like child's play compared to what was coming next. The folder was labeled Ava Thompson, personal and confidential. Ava was my daughter from a relationship before Rebecca, a brilliant young woman who'd been working in Teknova's IT department for 2 years under her mother's maiden name. Rebecca and the family had no idea who she really was. I dialed Ava's number. She answered on the first ring. Dad, I heard about the board meeting. Are you okay? Ava, I need you to listen carefully, I said. Tomorrow morning, Vincent Blackwood is going to take control of Teknova. I need you to be ready to execute Protocol 7. The system backdoors. Every single one. Administrative access, financial records, client databases. I want complete control transferred to Blackwood's team without anyone knowing you're involved. Dad, that's going to destroy their ability to fight back. That's the point, sweetheart. They declared war on the wrong engineer. The law office Vincent chose was deliberately obscure, a glass tower in downtown San Francisco that most people drove past without noticing. At 2 a.m., it was perfect for our purposes. No witnesses, no records, just 2 men conducting business in the shadows. Vincent was waiting in the conference room, surrounded by 3 lawyers and enough paperwork to choke a horse. He looked exactly like I remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the predatory confidence of someone who'd built an empire by consuming smaller companies. James, he stood and extended his hand. You look like hell. I feel worse, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. But I'm about to feel a lot better. The lead attorney, a woman with steel gray hair and no patience for small talk, slid a folder across the table. These are the transfer documents. $79 million for all shares controlled by James Thornfield in Teknova Industries, to be transferred to Apex Dynamics through the subsidiary Blackstone Holdings. I scanned the papers quickly. Everything looked clean, untraceable, and completely legal. What about the employee transition? That's your family's problem now, Vincent said with a cold smile. Though I suspect most of the key personnel will be interested in discussing new opportunities once word gets out about the management change. Speaking of management changes, I pulled out my own folder. You'll need these access codes. Complete administrative control over all systems, financial accounts, and client databases. My daughter Ava will ensure a smooth transition tomorrow morning. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You have a daughter in the company? IT department. She's been my insurance policy for 2 years. Rebecca and the others have no idea she exists. Remarkable. A family coup undone by family they didn't know existed. I signed the final documents and watched as Vincent's attorneys notarized each page. $79 million was about to change hands, and my so-called family would wake up tomorrow owning exactly nothing. One more thing, Vincent, I said as we prepared to leave. When you tell them about the acquisition, I want to be there. Via video conference. Any particular reason? I want to see their faces when they realize what just happened. Especially the lawyer. Vincent's smile turned predatory. I like your style, James. Consider it done. By 3:30 a.m., the paperwork was complete, filed, and legally binding. I walked out of that building a very wealthy man who just handed his life's work to his former enemy. But as I drove home through the empty streets of San Francisco, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction. Tomorrow is going to be very interesting. 9:03 a.m. Pacific Time. I was sitting in my home office, 3 monitors displaying various news feeds and corporate dashboards, when the first domino fell. Carmen Rodriguez, my housekeeper who also happened to clean Rebecca's office twice a week, sent me a text. Mrs. Thornfield just screamed at her computer. Something about access denied. The beauty of having inside information is timing. While my former family was discovering their new reality, I was watching it unfold in real time through carefully placed sources. Carmen had been feeding me information for months, not because I asked her to, but because she'd witnessed enough of their scheming to pick a side. At 9:07, Clayton Hayes called me. I let it go to voicemail. Then again at 9:09 and 9:11. By 9:15, he'd left 4 increasingly panicked messages, each one more desperate than the last. James, something's wrong with the system. I can't access anything. Call me back right now. I poured myself coffee and opened my secure laptop. Ava had done her job perfectly. Every system in Technova was now locked down, waiting for Vincent Blackwood's authorization codes. The transition was seamless, professional, and absolutely devastating to anyone who thought they still owned the company. My phone rang again. This time it was Stella Morrison, the family's corporate attorney. I decided to answer this one. James, thank God. Stella's voice was tight with stress. Something's happened to the company's systems. We're completely locked out. That's strange, Stella, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Have you tried calling IT? They're not answering. James, this is serious. We need your help. I'm afraid I can't help you there. Stella, as of yesterday, I'm no longer associated with Technova Industries. You'll need to work through the proper channels. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her legal mind, trying to process what was happening. James, what did you do? I followed the board's recommendation and transitioned out of active management. Isn't that what everyone wanted? At 9:23, Rebecca called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. James, you need to get down here right now. Rebecca's voice had lost all its boardroom confidence. Something's very wrong. I'm afraid I can't help you, Rebecca. My access was revoked yesterday, remember? Don't play games with me. What's happening? I suppose you'll find out soon enough. I hear Vincent Blackwood is announcing a press conference at 10:30. The line went dead. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Phase 2 of the Phoenix Protocol was exceeding expectations. In 30 minutes, my family would discover that their coup had been nothing more than an elaborate suicide mission. The emergency board meeting started at 10:45 a.m. in Technova's main conference room. I wasn't there physically, but Ava had rigged the room's cameras weeks ago, giving me a front row seat to the destruction. Vincent Blackwood appeared on the main monitor via video conference, looking every inch the conquering corporate warrior. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, flanked by Clayton and Landon. Stella Morrison was frantically shuffling through legal documents, looking for some escape clause that didn't exist. They all looked like passengers on the Titanic who just realized the ship was sinking. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who held all the cards. "I'm pleased to inform you that as of 6 a.m. this morning, Apex Dynamics has acquired controlling interest in Technova Industries." The silence in that room was beautiful. I watched Rebecca's face drain of color as the words sank in. Clayton finally found his voice. "That's impossible. We own this company." "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Mr. Hayes," Vincent replied smoothly. "According to the transfer documents filed this morning, James Thornfield sold his controlling interest to Apex Dynamics for $79 million. James doesn't have controlling interest." Landon protested. "We restructured the ownership months ago." "Ah, that's where you made your mistake." Vincent's smile was predatory. "You restructured the visible ownership. What you failed to account for were the shadow structures James had been building for years. Shell companies, trust arrangements, and proxy agreements that gave him effective control of 48.6% of the company." Stella Morrison's face went sheet white. Her hands shook as she flipped through her legal files, desperately searching for something she'd missed. "The documents. We reviewed everything." "You reviewed what James wanted you to see," Vincent continued. "The real ownership structure was hidden in plain sight, buried in boilerplate language you approved without reading." Rebecca finally exploded. "Where is James? I want to talk to him right now." "I'm right here," I said, unmuting my audio feed. Every head in that room turned toward the speaker. The looks on their faces, shock, betrayal, and dawning horror, were worth every penny of the $79 million I'd just earned. "Hello, family," I continued, my voice calm and measured. "I hope you're enjoying your new leadership experience." "You bastard," Clayton snarled. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. And I did. You voted me out, remember? I simply followed your advice and transitioned out of active management. We'll sue you into bankruptcy." Rebecca screamed. "Sue me for what?" "Selling my own property. I think you'll find everything was completely legal." "Stella can confirm that. Can't you, Stella?" Stella Morrison looked like she was about to be sick. Her carefully constructed legal framework had just collapsed, and she knew it. "The transfer documents are airtight," she whispered. "We have no legal recourse." Vincent Blackwood's laughter filled the room. "Welcome to the big leagues, folks. James, pleasure doing business with you." I ended my audio feed and closed the laptop. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is just good business. 2 days after the acquisition, I was tending to my vegetable garden when Wyatt Pierce called. Wyatt was one of the best investigative journalists on the West Coast, specializing in corporate fraud and financial crimes. We'd known each other for 15 years, ever since he'd written a favorable piece about Technova's early innovations. "James," Wyatt's voice carried that familiar hunger of a reporter who'd caught the scent of a big story. "I just got off the phone with Vincent Blackwood's PR team. They're spinning your acquisition as a strategic partnership, but something doesn't smell right." I set down my pruning shears and walked toward my workshop. "What kind of smell, Wyatt?" "The kind that suggests your family didn't see this coming." I've been doing some digging into Technova's recent financial filings, and there are some interesting discrepancies, such as payment authorizations that don't match the voting records, shell company transactions that were approved by people who claim they never saw the paperwork. And then there's the small matter of several $1 million in consulting fees paid to companies that don't seem to exist. I smiled. Wyatt had stumbled onto something even I hadn't expected to surface so quickly. That does sound interesting. "James, I need to ask you directly, did your family commit fraud?" I paused at the entrance to my workshop, considering my words carefully. "Wyatt, I can't speak to their business practices after my departure, but I can tell you that there's a USB drive and a safety deposit box at First National Bank of Palo Alto. Box 1247. The key is taped under the third drawer of my old desk in the Technova Executive Suite." "What's on the drive?" "Financial records, email chains, and recorded conversations spanning the last 3 years. Everything a good investigative journalist would need to write a Pulitzer-worthy expose." The line went quiet for a long moment. "James, are you sure about this?" "Wyatt, my family stole my company and tried to destroy my reputation. They deserve whatever consequences come from their own actions. This could destroy them completely. That's not my problem anymore. They made their choices. Now they can live with the results. After ending the call, I entered my workshop and opened another hidden safe. Inside were duplicate copies of every incriminating document I'd collected over the past 3 years. Clayton's unauthorized use of company funds for personal investments. Landon's kickback schemes with overseas suppliers. Rebecca's insider trading based on non-public acquisition discussions. I've been saving this ammunition for exactly this moment. While they've been plotting against me, I've been documenting their crimes. Now Wyatt Pierce would have everything he needed to write the story that would finish what Vincent Blackwood had started. Rex Dalton emerged from the shadows near my workbench. My old security chief had been keeping watch over the property since the acquisition, making sure my former family didn't try anything desperate. "Boss," Rex said in his characteristic grunt. "Spotted Clayton Hayes driving past the house twice in the last hour. Want me to have a conversation with him?" "Not yet, Rex. But keep watching. Desperate people do stupid things, and I want to be ready when they make their move." Rex nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. 6 years of special operations training had taught him patience, and right now patience was exactly what we needed. The knock on my door came at 11 p.m., 3 days after Vincent's takeover announcement. I wasn't surprised to see Rebecca standing on my doorstep, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her hands were shaking. "James, we need to talk," she said without preamble. I stepped aside and let her into the foyer, but no further. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "I want my life back," she replied, her voice breaking. "This isn't what was supposed to happen." "Really? What was supposed to happen?" "We were going to bring you back after a few months. It was Clayton's idea. He said we needed to show the board that the company could function without you, then bring you back as chairman emeritus with a reduced role." I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the marble foyer. "And you believe that?" "Clayton showed us documents, James. Financial projections that proved the company would be worth twice as much with younger leadership. He had spreadsheets, market analysis. Everything looked legitimate. Let me guess. Those documents were prepared by an outside consulting firm." Rebecca nodded frantically. "Meridian Strategic Consulting. They spent months analyzing our operations." "Rebecca, there is no Meridian Strategic Consulting." I checked. "It's a shell company Clayton created to justify his coup. Those financial projections were complete fiction designed to convince you to betray me." The blood drained from her face. "That's impossible." I pulled out my tablet and showed her the corporate registration records I pulled up earlier. Meridian Strategic Consulting was incorporated in Delaware 3 months ago. The sole owner is listed as CH Holdings, Clayton Hayes Holdings. "He played you, Rebecca, all of you." She staggered backward, catching herself against the doorframe. He said we were saving the company. He was stealing it, and he used you to do it. "James, you have to help us. Clayton's been moving money out of the company accounts. Millions of dollars just disappeared into offshore accounts yesterday. That's not my problem anymore. It is your problem. Those were your company assets. He's stealing from you too." I shook my head. "Those assets belong to Technova Industries, which now belongs to Vincent Blackwood. If Clayton's stealing from Vincent, that's Vincent's problem to solve." Rebecca started crying, real tears this time, not the crocodile tears she'd used during our marriage when she wanted something. "What about us, James? What about our marriage?" "What marriage? You voted to destroy me in that boardroom. You sat there like a statue while your family carved up my life's work. There is no us anymore. I made a mistake." "No, Rebecca, you made a choice. You chose money over loyalty, ambition over love, and greed over family. Now you get to live with that choice." I opened the front door. "Goodbye, Rebecca. Don't come back." She stood there for a moment, tears streaming down her face, before finally walking out into the night. I watched her drive away, then locked the door and activated the security system. Rex appeared from the shadows of the living room. "She's gone, boss. You want me to keep an eye on her?" "No need, Rex. Rebecca's not the threat anymore. But Clayton Hayes is about to become very dangerous. He's got millions of stolen dollars and nothing left to lose. Say the word, boss." "Not yet, but soon." 6 weeks after Vincent's acquisition, the FBI raid on Technova made the front page of every tech publication in the country. I watched from my home office as federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of the building I'd once called home. Wyatt Pierce's expose had triggered a massive federal investigation into corporate fraud, and my former family was learning the hard way that crime doesn't pay. Clayton Hayes was arrested at San Francisco International Airport, trying to board a flight to Switzerland with 2 suitcases full of cash and bearer bonds. The FBI had been tracking his movements for weeks, waiting for him to make exactly that kind of desperate move. He was charged with embezzlement, securities fraud, and money laundering, crimes that carried a combined sentence of 35 years in federal prison. Landon Cruz tried to flee to his cousin's ranch in Montana, but Rex Dalton had been monitoring his communications. The FBI found him hiding in a barn, surrounded by burned documents and empty hard drives. His attempt to destroy evidence only added obstruction of justice to his growing list of federal charges. Stella Morrison, the family attorney, turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. Smart woman realized that defending criminals was different from being one. Her testimony revealed the full scope of the family's fraudulent activities, including forged board resolutions and fabricated financial reports. Rebecca lasted the longest, holed up in our Athens mansion with a team of high-priced criminal defense lawyers. But even the best attorneys couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence I'd provided to the federal prosecutors. When they finally arrested her, she was wearing the same navy blazer she'd worn to my execution in the boardroom. The news coverage was brutal. Silicon Valley dynasty crumbles in massive fraud scandal, read the headline in the Wall Street Journal. Wyatt Pierce's investigative series won him a Pulitzer Prize and destroyed what was left of my family's reputation. Vincent Blackwood called me during the height of the media frenzy. "James, I have to admit, I didn't see this level of corruption coming when we made our deal." "I told you they were stealing the company," I replied. "I just didn't mention they were stealing it from everyone." The acquisition is looking even better now. With all the bad actors gone, Technova's core business is remarkably solid. That's because the core business was built by people who actually knew what they were doing. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you. Would you be interested in coming back as a consultant? Help us rebuild what they nearly destroyed. I looked out my window at the vegetable garden I'd been tending, then at the workshop where I'd been developing new innovations without the burden of corporate politics. "Thanks, Vincent, but I'm done with that life. Technova was my past. Whatever comes next is my future. What will you do with the $79 million? Something that matters. Something they can never steal." 1 year later, I stood in the lobby of the Thornfield Innovation Center, watching young entrepreneurs pitch their ideas to a panel of investors. The building was modest compared to Technova's corporate headquarters, but it felt more authentic, more like the garage where everything started. The $79 million from Vincent had become the seed money for something unprecedented, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping inventors and entrepreneurs who couldn't afford traditional venture capital. No corporate politics, no family backstabbing, just pure innovation supported by people who understood the struggle. Ava had left Apex Dynamics to become my chief technology officer, officially acknowledging our father-daughter relationship for the first time. She'd inherited my engineering instincts and her mother's business sense, making her the perfect person to evaluate technical proposals. "Dad," Ava approached me with a tablet displaying the latest batch of applications. "We've got 3 military veterans with a breakthrough in prosthetics technology, a single mother who's developed a new water purification system, and a teenager from Oakland who's built a more efficient solar panel design. Approve them all," I said without hesitation. "If they're willing to work, we're willing to support them." Rex Dalton had transitioned from security chief to operations manager, applying his military precision to the foundation's daily operations. Watching him mentor young entrepreneurs was like seeing a different side of an old warrior, still tough, but nurturing in his own way. The local newspaper had run a feature story about the foundation, calling it Silicon Valley's second chance. They'd interviewed several of our success stories, including a former Technova engineer who developed revolutionary battery technology after being laid off during Vincent's restructuring. Mr. Thornfield, one of the young entrepreneurs, approached me after his successful presentation. "I wanted to thank you for giving people like us a chance. My grandfather always said that real leaders don't just build companies, they build other leaders." I shook his hand, feeling the calluses of someone who worked with his hands. Your grandfather sounded like a wise man. He was a mechanic who started his own shop with nothing but tools and determination. He would have liked what you're doing here. As I drove home that evening, I passed the billboard that used to advertise Technova. Now it promoted a new startup incubator funded by Apex Dynamics. The corporate world had moved on, as it always does. But in my rearview mirror, I could see the Innovation Center's lights still burning bright. Inside that building, the next generation of inventors was working late into the night, just like I had in my garage 25 years ago. Rebecca, Clayton, and Landon were serving their sentences in federal prison. Stella Morrison was working as a paralegal in Fresno, her legal license permanently revoked. Their empire of greed had crumbled, but something better had risen from its ashes. That night, I sat in my workshop, not the one in the garage where Technova was born, but a new one attached to the Innovation Center. On my workbench was a prototype for a device that could change everything, a low-cost communication system for disaster relief operations. I picked up my soldering iron and got back to work. After all, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation.